but I can send you. Ooh,
Oh,
okay.
Oh yeah, no. Oh, if you wanted to, yeah.
I can send you that video if you want to link it to it.
Oh gosh, yeah, do that afterwards. So
Yeah.
that
So that's the first story I'm going to tell. So we'll just talk about the link.
Yeah, sure. Right. Anyway, we're live now. Just wait for people to join. Yeah, no, if you want. I do this all the time. We haven't got anyone on the chat yet, so I will just wait till we fire up and then we'll be good to go. This is what I love about YouTube. It has this delay and then suddenly you just have this burst of people that just come on. But I'm gonna keep this on for now, and then I have my Rumble chat. Just wait. I think people.
And how long are you expecting this first one to go?
No.
How long? Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Like I said, it's I have Scotty was asking me this as well, if how long is it going to be, and I said, well, it's an hour, but my shows are usually just a conversation between two friends, and my guest usually has facts and stuff. Okay, we are live, and it's firing up. People are joining. So, welcome to the Love in Action show once again today, folks. This is the third time you're seeing me live. I'm really keen on in the lead up to the 11/11 energies and 11/11 portals, and I'm delighted to have a very special guest with me all the way from LA and Cooperstown, Dr. Ken Cooper. Fancy seeing you again so soon.
Yes, ma'am. More than happy to see you again.
I'm so blessed to have met you, and I have to honor Amelia. Amelia, if you're watching this right now, thank you very much for introducing Dr. Cooper. And not only do I feel I've met a friend, but someone that actually was able to communicate to my physical body in the way in which I needed. And that happened simply because I made this decision to surrender and really ask for help. My trip to LA was phenomenal. I was at the Truth Tour and I was just aligning. And the trip ended with Dr. Cooper, and the synergy that we both connected on the level that I needed, first and foremost, clicked me. Ooh, I'll share that journey afterwards because I was still a bit what happened there after our first treatment. But it's just so nice to have you here, and I think it's very important. The reason why I invited you to my show is that where we are in humanity, there's so much going on, Dr. Cooper, so many different rhetorics, especially in the medical realm, and what you do and how you practice is nothing short of phenomenal. The energy there is what every practice needs to be like: joyful, supportive, and attentive. Dr. Cooper, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing fabulous. Thank you for recognizing that. You know, I think that having the culture here and the way that we built this to be such a loving, educating, and inspiring environment, we actually created a place of hope. So where miracles can be expected. And the first thing I want to tell you is the quote that I'm going to put on the wall from, I quote everybody else, but now it's time to quote me. In the absence of understanding neurology, everything looks like magic. So in the absence of understanding neurology, everything looks like magic. And I want to tell you a story about one of our practice members who was one of my interns. So we have an internship program where when there's people that are interested in becoming a doctor or a therapist or a chiropractor, they can apply for our internship to see if this is the realm that they want to go in. And so we had this one gal that was a phenomenal athlete, and she became one of our interns, and then she got a full ride scholarship to a chiropractic school that's up in San Francisco area. And part of her scholarship was to play rugby for them.
Oh, nice.
She was a female basketball player in college. She was offered to go to Europe, and they offered her like $500,000 a season. And she's like, you know what, I can't take opportunity over purpose. It's not my purpose. My purpose is to serve and save mankind with the gifts of chiropractic. And so So she went on to chiropractic school, but the unfortunate part was she got really seriously injured. And in a game, she got hit by two girls from opposite directions, and she was paralyzed.
Wow.
And they took her off the field, and she was unconscious. And they took her to Stanford University Hospital, and she was there for 21 days. But when she went in, she was completely paralyzed. As time went on, she got her upper body back, but she only could use one leg, and the other leg was completely unable to be, it was not functional. So I told her mother, who lives down here, I said, you just gotta bring her down here. You got to get her back here. You got to get her into this concussion program that we developed from research that came out of Harvard. And she did. She drove her like the 6 hours down here. And I'll tell you, in the first day, it took me about 3 hours, but in 3 hours, I got all the strength back in her leg.
Wow.
And it was assisted, but on that first day, she took 3 steps. And within the next 7 days, now we were recording this, put it on social media so you can see this, you can watch your progress.
Yeah. Okay. So this was the girl that I saw on the Instagram, right? So
yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
How long has she been like that? How long was it between the accident and when she came to you?
21 days.
Okay, so 3 weeks she resigned to a life of perhaps never thinking that she may never walk again.
Well, so now we had a discussion. So you just have to understand this too. Just kind of the same discussion you and I had was that you can, this injury is going to define you whether you want it to or not. But your definitions are either going to be, I'm going to succumb to this and be a victim of it, or I'm going to learn, I'm going to rebound, and I'm going to become a champion as a result of it. And she said, I want to be a champion.
Wow.
And that's what she did. So like I say, in day 1, she was able to take 3 steps. By day 7, she was able to walk with a walker. By day 21 that she was able to walk by herself in the door. She is now back to full school, full education, and went back to rugby. And our CBS channel, which is like a big American TV network, took a whole 5-minute segment in LA, which that's huge. Wow. For her story alone. It was so cool. Millions of views on social media. And it was absolutely tremendous. But I'll go back to that first statement. In the absence of understanding neurology, everything looks like magic. So you've got these people that are watching your show that are sad and depressed and anxious because they've had an injury that they don't think that there's any possibility for them to recover. And I'm here to tell you today and right now, that possibility does exist. And we just got to get you to the right person that can do that.
Absolutely.
Thankfully, I was the right guy for her, as I was the right guy for you.
100%. And this is where I think miracles happen, when you decide, when you say yes to yourself. And you really have to be congruent and say, yes, I want to get better. Because the show that I had just before this, an hour before, the lovely lady, Michelle, mentioned a very good point. It's the stories we tell ourselves. So we have to take personal responsibility and that willingness and that personal emotional tenacity to say, right, I can, moving from victor to victim, moving away from victim consciousness to victor,
Right.
And taking that responsibility. And it's not necessarily easy, because look, the road to healing is an arduous one initially. Okay. And, you're out there trying to figure out what's going on. Is it Lyme's? Is it fibromyalgia? Is it this? Is it that? What's going on? And then you go from pillar to post, you go from one alternative practitioner to another, and you're feeling further and further lost. And then you try something that works for a while. And the issue lies, personally, is what I say, is because you, I don't want to be negative when I say contaminate your mind with too many things. They say too many cooks spoil the broth, but then you become overwhelmed with what's out there, and you're sort of self-diagnosing yourself along the way.
Yeah.
And you really need to take things into your own hands, say, right, I need someone who is obviously experienced and good at what they do, well recognized in whatever issue that you have, to be able to deal with what you have. So when I came into your I don't want to call it office, but your place, like a base. It looks like I was about to say your field.
That's what it is.
Let's say your baseball field, and then I had to step back. But when I came there, again, the energy was so friendly and different, and the vibe was just exuberant. So automatically you come in and you think, okay, this is a bit different. Okay. And I know Amelia's, said that Dr. Cooper's really good. She said, I've only spoken to him on Zoom, but she hadn't met you in person. So by the time I came in, again, the energy was great. And when you can speak to your patient and actually really help them and roadmap them to figuring out what's going on, that in itself is something that I find priceless, because trust me, I have gone from pillar to post to everywhere just to find out what really is going on. Now, I take a lot of responsibility as well. And that's something that's really important, that if you're not well, it's not going to be a linear journey. You're going to have your ups and downs. So is it any wonder that you won, you were a winner of top chiropractic offices worldwide, chosen by the Ultimate Achievers Club? I had to just get that in there. And all this information about Dr. Cooper will be in the bio, but I really wanted to say that because it doesn't surprise me. And then the shift was after the clicking. I was just like, oh God, this was something's happened. So guess what, ladies and gents, this is why I'm doing 5 shows in a day.
Exactly. We turned the power back on.
There was a switch here, just over here, needed to be pushed. But it's true. But it was the brain, right? I started this journey with this, let's just tell the world about what's going on and, just reveal all the terrible things that are happening in the world. And 6 months into it, zap, I got it's almost like a concussion.
Yeah.
Right. And then it became, now, it was interesting you say that. I believe it's because I had a head injury 2 years before, and that never, ever got sorted.
I think today you and I will have a whole nother discussion of things that you're going to become aware of that you may never been aware of. And you're going to say, oh my gosh, I never even put those pieces of the puzzle together.
Yeah. Well, it was actually at my own party. It was at my birthday party, and it was a really beautiful place in central London. And then this new bar had just been transformed and renovated, and they put this softball play area where adults can jump into this softball area. It was a really cool thing. And and the ceiling was very low. And as I was going to jump in, Madam here didn't think, and you can't jump because there's not much of a space between your head and the ceiling as it is. And I hit my head. And I think that's got something to do with it, which is what when you were saying, what you said earlier on. So this is really important. People don't know this.
No. So let's go over the 12 things, because the very first thing that would have happened when you hit your head is that the intestine becomes what we'll call permeable. So rather than it being a barrier, within 3 hours, it opens up. So if you can think of your intestine being like a balloon arch, when you have this impact, that's like a dart that pops the balloons. And so the problem that we have now is that for that person, this destruction in the intestinal tract, and again, we also know that 70-80% of your immunity is in your intestinal tract. Now, all of a sudden, we've got all these different problems. So one of the biggest things that we find is that bowel movements become really irregular in this condition. And that's just because now poisons are passing through relatively easily, and rather than them being excreted, They don't. Well, so what we found out with you is that when those poisons go into the blood system, guess where they go? They go straight into the brain. And so that's a big problem. The number two thing is about how the gut processes the stuff that's in there. So here's another crazy statistic. Did you know, like, an enormous percentage of people, like over 70% of people that have irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, happen as a result of a concussion?
Wow.
So how many of those people watching on your program right now go like, wait a minute, I suffer IBS. Wait a minute. I jumped into like the pit with the little balls that you're going to play with and I hit my head, or I, hit my head on the car, or I got rear-ended in a car accident. I never put those two things, two separate things together, because they are the component of the same thing. And then when we add in about the gut-brain connection and the gut-brain axis, that's the vagus nerve, right? So I actually met the guy that in America, we have the National Institute of Health. They paid him $40 million to prove the gut-brain connection.
Wow.
Yeah, I was so impressed with him. Perhaps the smartest guy I've ever met. And so he actually was the one that explained to me that 90% of the information that flows in the vagus nerve don't go from the brain to the gut, but it goes from the gut to the brain.
Yes.
So when the gut is in this bad place, then what's going to happen is we're going to actually have this overwhelm going on into the brain as well. And so now here we have anxiety, and here we have depression, and here we have all these other different types of mental and emotional baggage that happens, but it happens because the gut is no longer processing, it became permeable, and now all these poisons are just diving through. And then alongside of that, number three is the immune system quality just diminishes, because that's where the majority of your immune system is. Now the immune system is highly vulnerable, right? And just coming through the last, few years where, we had to turn that conversation from, it's not the strength of the virus, it's the strength of the host, right? I'll give you an example. In our center, there's 4 doctors, and from March 15th, when America did their shutdown, through August 15th the following year, a year and a half exactly, we saw 34,000 people. And of that group, we exactly had 100 get sick. And of those 100, not one of them had to go to the hospital, and not one of them died. And we had 2 that took 14 days to recover, and we had 3 that took 10 days, and we had 3 that took 7 days, and everybody else was over that dreaded illness in 4 or 5 days. That's because what we did was we got rid of that vulnerability of the immune system. See, when I was in school, 35 years ago, they said, here's your nervous system, here's your immune system, here's how it's connected. That's what they knew. When I went back and did my pediatric degree, what they know now, it's one and the same. It's exactly the same system. So when the nervous system is depressed, guess what immunity is? But the moment you boost the nervous system, guess what you do with your immune system? So research shows that within 45 minutes of when I did that correction, that adjustment on you, that the white blood cells that are in your upper respiratory system, they increase, and they don't just increase by like a half or 3/4 or, double. They increase by 15 or 16 times.
Yeah.
I mean, so what does that mean? Well, that means that you can get adjusted, and within 45 minutes, by the time you're at your car, anything that could possibly be happening to you, your body's already going to change.
Yeah.
And it's going to change it a lot of different ways. One of the ways that the body's going to get rid of infection is through a fever. So can we talk about that for a few minutes?
Yeah, sure.
So let's just play back and forth. What do you understand is the purpose of a fever?
To get rid of toxins.
To get rid of toxins. Right. Yeah. So just exactly how
your body telling you that it's got some kind of host that it's not that doesn't serve the immune system. So your body has a natural mechanism to get rid. So it's your immune system sort of saying, right, there's some things that are not good for the body, and now we're going to have to amplify and sweat it out.
Right. So now here's the question. Is that the primary system or is that the secondary system? What do you think?
It's the secondary.
It is the secondary. So the primary system is your white blood cells.
Yeah.
So you're right. So with a fever raises your body temperature to such a degree that it's going to cook out whatever doesn't belong there. So do we ever lower a fever? Rarely. Only for me personally, this is not for everybody. For me personally, I educate our practice members that at 102.5, that's my threshold. That's as high as I want to go with a fever. If it's below that, let it cook, keep that person hydrated, keep them comfortable. Okay, at 102.5, you have to react. So at that point, I would do like a warm bath. Now, why don't we do a cold bath? Well, because if you put the temperature of the water at 90 and the fever's at 102.5, there's still such a degree of this, difference that heat's going to dissipate, right? So we don't do a cold bath. We don't do an ice bath. We're not going to shock the body. That's old data. That's not sensible, right?
Yeah.
So I would do that, number one. Number two, I would do an adjustment. But number three, before I would reach for Tylenol, and I know Tylenol's got to be one of those really big hits for you, and we'll talk about that when we talk about the next one, the fourth thing to know. But before you reach for that, you want to reach for calcium. Why calcium? Because the fever is the secondary backup for fighting infection, but the primary way to fight infection is through white blood cells. So white blood cells, remember, did you ever play that game Pac-Man?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So white blood cells play like Pac-Man. They just go gobble everything up, right? That's what they do. But if you can think of a white blood cell being like the candle that you lit, the thing is that, the candles are great, but what do you have to do to them so they can shine? You have to ignite them.
Right.
What ignites white blood cells? Calcium.
Calcium, right.
So why is it that we could take a person with a fever and give them calcium and within minutes, their fever drops? Because you activated the primary system and now the secondary system can take a step back. So now for your listeners too, we want to also understand that in a child, the height of the fever has nothing to do with the degree of illness. In you and I, it does, right? So if you and I hit 103, yeah, there's something serious going on. But a child, because their body is so immature, it still needs to find the temperature at which it's going to be able to do the kill. And so, essentially the idea is they can go from normal to 102 like that. And as a parent, you don't want to freak out over that. You just gotta know like that is okay. But you want to go and you want to keep them comfortable. You want to keep them balanced. And the other thing is too, is then you'll hear some myths. And the one myth is, oh, well, if my child's fever gets too high, they could have a seizure. And once they have a seizure, they could always have seizures. Yeah, well, that's a myth. I understand about the fear-based mentality, but let's understand what the seizure is. It's just the dissipation of the heat. It's like a radiator. So they're actually causing it to go down, right? And because with chiropractic, what we do is we reset that power from above down, from the inside out. We're resetting that neurology every single time we put our hands on that person, so that memorized function that just happened, that doesn't maintain, that doesn't stay that way. The other aspect of that is I'll lost my train of thought. Okay.
I have a question. That's why, because you could feel my question coming in there. But it's so with the concussions and with children, even, do you work with them with the alignments? With children who've had concussions. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So, for example,
I work on all sorts of children. I have a child coming up after this podcast. The mom's driving her up. So this is our close day, but she's driving the baby an hour up because the baby has croup. And so I will be able to attend to that. And this baby was born, he's now 5 weeks old.
right. Well, it's interesting because you said with children, also it just so happens, it's like this alignment energy that I'm going through at the moment over the last 2 weeks with the weirdest synchronicities. One of them was I was thinking about what I'd experienced at your practice, and just then my phone beeps and my brother has sent me Instagram video of a little puppy getting aligned, and this yeah, is amazing. It was a chiropractor for pets, and he's doing this with, and then I go on his Instagram pet, and I'm like this is strange. I'm just thinking about Dr. Cooper and what I was going through when I was just reading all my medicine that I have to take, not medicine, but my healing supplements.
Right.
Call it medicine, my healing supplements, because I'm changing every reverberation, every story within myself of what I tell myself. So it has to start from self and how we talk to ourselves. But then at that very same instant that I get this message from my brother, and I just chuckled because I'm still curious about how this works. Obviously, I've had it done once before. I've had myself aligned in many years ago.
Yeah.
And my brother's a huge advocate of going to see a good chiropractor, and I just don't know any good ones here. And he's always trying to do it to me. Yeah. He's always trying to like click my neck and do all of this, and it scares me because he's not trained. So is it fair to say that like when you do the upper area, because this is where the sort of pain for me is usually quite. And this is where I believe that this congestion, I liken it to having congestion here. And that's why it's causing all this fog.
Right. Well, so people even told me that they felt like their head was a clogged toilet. And the moment that I made the adjustment, it like flushed. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, really simply understood, the brain controls everything. I mean, everybody knows what runs the whole show is the brain. You know, the French figured that out during the French Revolution. You know, you chop off your hand, okay, well, you just don't work the same. You chop off your foot, you walk different. You chop off your head, it's pretty much all over, right? There's just no more. So your brain runs the whole show, but the only way the brain can communicate to the body is in the nervous system. So the nervous system is the only link your brain has to the rest of your body. And it is so important that God or the universal intelligence decided to completely enclose it in bone. It is the only organ, the brain and the nervous system are the only organs completely surrounded in bone. But then that brings up a thought. Let's think about back in London, back in the days of kings and queens and knights and armor. And if the knight put his armor on backwards, how functional would that be? You know, right? None at all. So if those bones in the spine move out of their normal alignment, it's going to be having like armor on backwards. It's just not going to be able to function. And again, the only way the brain communicates to the heart's through the nervous system. So if you cut the nerves off to the heart, guess what's going to happen? Right? It's just not rocket science. So what we want to do is always identify, is that indeed the case? And based on what that person is complaining about, is that the reason for their complaint? And if it is, then we can correct it. If it's not, then I mean, I'd be wasting their time. And so that's the one thing I just don't do. You saw what my day was like. I don't have time to waste. Yeah. Right. So I just make sure that every moment is highly valuable for everybody that we, come in contact with.
Yeah. Time is precious. Yeah. My dad used to say, time is a very precious commodity, Alpa.
I like the little accent you throw in there.
Time is a very precious commodity. Yes. And I'm going to be there exactly at 3:52 and 17 seconds. I kid you not. He'll phone me when he literally is 15 seconds away, and he'll just say, time is a precious commodity. And I'm like, there you go. Yeah, he's a special one. But this, getting yourself aligned, literally, there's so many connotations to that. If we think about it, we're getting ourselves aligned. We need to feel aligned in everything that we do. And if your body, the vehicle that takes you through your life every day. Yes, we're not our mind, we're not our body, and I understand all of that with this
Right.
spiritual context, and it's true.
Right.
This soul is eternal and infinite, and I get that. But in the here and now, in this lifetime, while we're here and want to be abundant, feel abundant, my body needs to feel abundant. And we cannot do the day-to-day activities or things that we want to if our body is not serving us. And I only truly realized this in since 2015, when I came back to South Africa, and I realized that whatever was going on with me, so it wasn't just this concussion, this is my story.
Right.
And not really truly getting what happened. I've had loads of falls, probably hit my head. I've hit my head so many times since I was a kid. And then of course, then we have the apparatus that have stung us all since birth, and how the impact of that will have played in all of our lives. Right. And so, unfortunately, with everything that's going on in humanity now, we have so much information at our fingertips to really learn what's going on, yet more and more and more and more people are sick.
Yeah.
Right. And then you're going to the medical fraternity in hope that you'll find a solution, but then we're just medicated and drugged unnecessarily. One good thing though is my higher self has always rejected that. I've never, they tried to put me on antidepressants. I have no idea, Dr. Cooper, why I wasn't well versed on alternative health practices or supplements, but it was just, I think the divine intervention said, no, you don't take that.
Right.
You don't. So we all have that intuitive compass, and now with everything that's going on, of course, everyone's just much more aware. And the medical fraternities do serve, because I say this, like if you get yourself into an accident, you can't eat a cucumber and get yourself back to health in that moment, can you?
Right. Under emergency situations, they're phenomenal. And that is really where that crisis care is just unmatched in anything. However, the problem is you cannot use a crisis model in health, because when you use a crisis model in health, now you create crisis in health. Right. And that is exactly where the problem is. That's the paradigm shift that we want to make, so that people can understand, like, you can be in this mentality, but how we're going to look is exactly the opposite way. Right. And just a way that we're going to look at, faith that your body can heal itself, that it was designed that way. I mean, you created this problem, you can recreate it. It's just got to be given the opportunity. It's about education. It's about inspiration. I mean, it's one thing to educate, and as you and I know, there's so much information that's out there, but it's about inspiration. Like, how does that inspire you to change your life? And what I hope that somebody or multiple people or everybody listening to your show today with our conversation becomes inspired to one thing, just minimally one thing, that they go like, I didn't know that. That makes so much sense. I could change that. And what that does is that creates hope. That's why I say, this center, we create a place of hope, right? And that's why we have the culture we have. And we do that so that these miracles can be expected. Right? Yeah. We want to put you in a position where that miracle that you need in your life is what exactly happens. And it doesn't matter to me what the condition is. It could be cancer, it could be fibromyalgia, it could be Lyme's disease, it could be a cough. It doesn't matter. Right? If it's based on the inability for your brain to communicate to your body, I can fix that. If it's based on the fact that there's something deficient in you and there's something toxic in you, I can fix that. I mean, that's kind of the cool part.
And with concussions, generally from your observation and your experience, the healing time, the brain can then restore and get back to a healthy, functioning way of being. So again,
but I'll tell you, I don't mean to cut you off, but I'll tell you that there's people that have come here with these different problems we've identified, and they said, oh yeah, Dr. Cooper, I had this happen, when I was in high school, and that was like 25 years ago. And so what I'll tell you is this: an untreated head injury is still untreated. It doesn't matter how much time went past, it's still not been cared for and appropriately designed, appropriately handled. And so handling these things, even years later, has been phenomenal, giving people their life back. And we have, here in America, we have American football. And so we call that the NFL. And in the NFL, that's a very big thing. And so one of the big populations in this practice is players from the NFL. And we particularly had one of them that was on our podcast, like, oh, maybe a year ago, where he had 7 concussions. And so unfortunately, with a concussion, you just don't remember stuff very well. And so he couldn't really remember his plays. Well, you can't be on the field if you can't remember what you're supposed to do. So the team that loved him and the people that adored him, they cut him. They just fired him because he couldn't remember his plays. And so he, through divine intervention, he found his way here, and we took care of him and we gave him that back. And he was able to go back to that same team and have the most stellar year ever, and a rejuvenation of his career. In America, NFL really means not for long, right? You're not going to be there. It's like your rugby players, the average lifespan of a rugby player, get this, is crazy, 32 games.
Wow. They take a lot of battering to their heads.
Yeah, absolutely. So that kind of brings me into the fourth thing we want to talk about. And the fourth thing is about the blood-brain barrier. So the blood-brain barrier is that barrier that goes around your brain and protects your brain so these toxins, these infections, and all these things can't penetrate through. And within 3 hours of this impact, that's wide open. It's wide open. So what does that mean? Well, let's go through the typical scenario. So the typical scenario is there's a child in high school in London. And just so you know, statistically, this is an American statistic. 15% of all high school students said they definitely knew they had a concussion, and they either did or did not report it. That's crazy. 71% of adults in America over 65 went to the emergency room because they fell and hit their head. That's 3 million. That's 8,125 a day.
Jeez.
A day, right? It's crazy. So this child, he's playing soccer, or you guys call it football, or you call it soccer?
Football. We call it football.
Playing football, and he's going to head a ball, and they go head to head with somebody else, and he has this concussion. Well, the parents are flipped out, and the trainer is going to check him, and the parent is going to tell, take him to the hospital. Totally appropriate, right? We said emergency medicine is brilliant, right? So he goes to the hospital. They said, he's had a concussion. The doctor checks him out and says, you know what, we want a CAT scan. Totally appropriate. We want to make sure there's nothing bleeding in his brain. That would be a life-threatening condition. So, it takes time and energy and hours, and that whole scenario about being in an emergency room and I get all this stuff done. And then the doctor comes in and goes, hey, great news. You dodged a bullet. There's nothing wrong on the CAT scan. You're going to be fine. You have a little headache. Take some Tylenol, and just, don't watch your TV for a while and get off your phone for a bit. And so the kid's going to walk out and he's going to go like, Mom, I'm so hungry. And Mom and Dad are off their schedule and everything's different. And he's like, I'm so hungry. Can we stop at like McDonald's and get something to eat? And the next thing you know, because this blood-brain barrier is so wide open, the caffeine that's in the soda and the sugar that's in the milkshake and the congealed oils that they cook those French fries with, all of that stuff is now penetrating through the brain and getting deep inside, and boom, right. That's where our problem exists. It's right there. So, right. What opens the blood-brain barrier even more? Tylenol. Now, I'm not sure if you guys have gotten this commercial yet in the UK, but there's a commercial here in America where this law group is saying, if your child is autistic and you were recommended to take Tylenol during your pregnancy,
now it's a claim.
There's your claim. Because now what they know is that Tylenol breaks open the blood-brain barrier, and it allows those deep toxins to get in, and toxins that could have been in the mother, in the food, or whatever, can now get into the baby's brain. And I mean, so like now it's everywhere. So then let's talk about, like, what do we call first aid? What do we do for first aid when this happens? Well, the very first thing we want to know is, like, when you hit your head, you're going to impact those bones of the skulls. And those bones are connected by these things called sutures. And what used to be believed that those sutures were stuck in their heart and they don't move, and that's not true. They move very much. But if what you did was you removed that bone, what you'd see inside is cartilage. And cartilage is kind of like how my ear and how it's really specifically formed. But that cartilage allows the cerebral spinal fluid to flow around the brain. Cerebral spinal fluid feeds the brain and gets rid of poison, kind of like a fish in a fish tank, right? It gets all the food out of the water, but it poops in the water too. Kind of the same idea. But we need it to be able to flow. We don't want it to be corked, right? So what happened with you when you got adjusted, it was almost like we uncorked that cerebral spinal fluid, and all that fluid could flow, and now your brain performs at a super high level. So let's look at another scenario where that happens. It happens with the child being born vaginally. So when a child's born, their head gets really kind of crazy shape, and it's great for that to happen. But how do we fix that? We have them breastfeed, because the action of sucking pops those bones back where they belong. So in this, I think God
I've always thought, doesn't the baby's head go through some kind of trauma when it's, you know, when you're giving birth?
Yeah. You ever see those kids in those little funky helmets? Yeah, that mom didn't breastfeed. It's like, breastfeed that kid. It does it itself.
Yeah, but
I mean, there may be severe cases. I mean,
it's like, you know, don't shame women for like not breastfeeding, but there's actually a medical reason. There's a necessary reason for that to happen.
Exactly. And there's multiples that we could go on that tangent, but so here's the thing. What actually closes the blood-brain barrier? Well, it's a nutrient called glutathione.
Yeah.
And where do we get glutathione? Best resource, dark green leafy vegetables. So what is the first aid for a person that's had that head injury? They go to like a smoothie shop and they get themselves like a kale shake, right? Not something loaded with like sugars and artificial things, but something that's dark green, leafy, that they can drink thick through a straw, pop those bones back where they belong, and seal that blood-brain barrier. Pretty cool, huh?
Wow. It makes me think that, because it's interesting, because I called my practice and they said, come in, and they gave me a Google printout saying, what was the word? Something concussion. No, I think they gave it to me.
Sometimes they call it transient brain injury.
No,
TBI.
It was a concussion, but it was something along you don't actually have to get it checked out type of concussion. And I said it was so I started bleeding. I still have a dent here.
Yeah. See, that's something we gotta fix.
Yeah, I have a dent here in my because it hit, you know, the kind of air conditioning grills, and it was on the ceiling. And you know, you've got to imagine if you're standing up and I'm on these sort of stairs about to jump and dive in.
Right.
Madam here got so excited because I saw all my friends in there, and everyone was going, a great time for my birthday. And they're like, you know, only Alpa would do something crazy like this. And I went to greet them, but I just got so excited thinking, you know, I'm going to jump right in, but I hit that. Now the cave, it's like the dent is crazy, but the fact that the doctors said, you're fine. Can't remember what kind of concussion they called it, but you'll be fine. It will heal in 2 weeks.
Okay.
And they didn't suggest, it was a bang, it was a nasty bang. They didn't suggest to get it checked out, like get a scan or anything. So therefore that then tells me that all the terrible things, if diets and ways of eating whatever at that particular time, immediately after, because there was alcohol at the party, copious amounts of alcohol, was a massive party, and everybody was like really merry and stuff, and I continued, whereas I should have got myself into an ambulance and gone to the hospital. So this is very informative. Thanks.
We'll fix it.
It's going to get people to start thinking. And it's interesting now, Dr. Cooper, and every time I put a doctor on, I'm just checking in. The algorithms are going crazy, but carry on.
Good. So
we're on 5 now, right?
yeah,
This-
yeah. So number 5, number 5 is about blood pressure. So because the blood pressure is regulated through a part that's like right at the base of the brainstem, it's very, very common to have irregularities in blood pressure. So this person's going to say, wow, it's so crazy. Like I always had normal blood pressure and now I go to the doctor and I'm like 160 over 90. Like, why did that happen? Because blood pressure regulation is done and it's diminished with the concussion and the brain injury. And as soon as we correct that, guess what happens with blood pressure?
Normalizes.
Right. The next one, number 6, is about the adrenal gland and your hormones. So crazy. So the adrenal gland, you and I talked about this. The adrenal gland makes adrenaline. Adrenaline is your fight or flight. It's like how well you handle stress. That's the number one thing. Adrenaline keeps you from getting dizzy when you're lying down and you stand up real fast. Adrenaline keeps the pupils of your eyes constricted when you go out in the bright sun. Right? If you go out in the bright sun and you're like, oh, I gotta find my sunglasses, right? That means your adrenal gland is poor. And statistically, we know that for the adrenal, as low as 25%, but as much as 100% of the people that have this impact and suffer this are going to have this adrenal problem. I saw this with my own son. I have 2 boys that played American football in college, and my one son suffered a concussion recently. And I was there with him, and I took him off the field, and I sat him down on a bench to start like trying to work with him. And he was so angry that he like literally ripped his gloves, but he didn't pull them off. He just like literally ripped them in half. And I was like, okay, that was a great example of like no stress handling, you know. And again, you know, you'll see that these people become very volatile in their mental and emotional capacity, and that's the problem with the adrenal. Well, for a female, the last thing we want to see is her female hormones dysregulated. So now all of a sudden she doesn't have a period, or all of a sudden she's got a period every 2 weeks, or she's got like, you know, a heavy flow. Like we had one girl, and as a matter of fact, she's one of our interns. She's going to be going to chiropractic school. But get this was crazy. In high school, this happened to her. She was a cheerleader. She got dropped on her head. She started a period. It went for 260 days straight.
No way. Wow.
Multiple transfusions. Doctors couldn't figure out how to stop it. I met her mom at a party, and the lady introducing me said, oh my gosh, this is where you need to take your daughter. And her mom's a nurse practitioner, so she understood medicine. And she and I started talking. She's like, oh, Dr. Cooper, I need you to take care of my daughter. You want to guess how many days it took me to get it stopped?
I was going to say
3
10
days. No,
Wow.
it was 10. Dang, I wouldn't be worth my weight if it was 10.
It was such a going on for 200 plus.
Yeah.
And you
260 days. Crazy. But then since then, every single time I've seen a case like that or anything to that, I knew exactly, this is exactly what I need to do to help that resolve. And I've been very fortunate that since then, every other woman, regardless of their age, that have had that excessive bleeding and that uncontrolled bleeding, we've been able to get it controlled. But you have to understand, with a concussion, the 6th most important thing is that the hormones are going to be dysregulated. The stress handling is going to be dysregulated, and people are not thinking out of that frontal brain anymore. Now they're shifting back into the brainstem. And remember, you know, where the front is very creative and the hindbrain's very reactive, the brainstem is kind of cataclysmic, right? So everything like, you know, I got to go to work, but I got a flat tire. My life is going to end because I got a flat tire, you know. And that's because they're working in that brainstem. We got to get them back out of that brainstem, get their thinking back up to that frontal lobe, so they can see these different possibilities of correction.
Wow.
Number 7.
To my journey.
What's that?
I'm looking forward to how, because I'm on this 2-month kind of journey with you. So
Yes.
if I'm not the full ticket by the end of this, I want a refund, from God.
Absolutely.
I'm like, I want a refund from life. Like I've gone from pillar to post, and it is the mind. The mind is so powerful, and in every single way, we are being exposed to so much. And one of the things that is stifling is if you're feeling like you're walking and operating in clouds.
Yeah.
No, it's like me, like going like wonder, like when I'm on my shows, I used to lose my train of thought so much, and I used to get very I was terrible in the earlier days when I started doing this, because I was just all over the place because my train of thought was so overactive. So
Yeah.
I genuinely feel a lot calmer though.
Yeah, that's cool. I honestly think that when you return, and now that knowing you have that dent in your head, we'll have to fix that too. But I think that you'll be able to share what this journey has been able to do for you. And it may not be like the completed journey, but I think you'll find just miraculous results. Actually, I already know. All right.
But I think this is so good for everyone watching. And I think we're safe in this conversation. So I'll leave it on YouTube, because it's very useful information for all of us to self-reflect and think, crap, when I hit my head and then I went straight away and I had alcohol, like what?
Right.
And
What was I thinking?
Well, no, we don't know though, do we? We
Well,
don't.
true.
And my mum's always saying to me, don't go out with a wet head. Like, when you've washed your hair, she goes, don't go out
Right.
into the cold. And then I thought, that's all nonsense, mum. But I think with my brain and the way I've been concussed many times, this is something we'll all be able to kind of sit back and reflect.
Yeah.
But
Well, and again, when we think about each one of these steps so far, like what do we do about it? If you have intestinal permeability, the very first thing you can do is start with like a probiotic. Or our friend Zach Bush makes an ion gut support that, like we talked about, like this like pops the balloons of the intestine. Yes, ion gut support like rebuilds those balloons like almost on contact.
Brilliant.
About visible processing, eating foods that are not gonna constipate you. Thinking about the immune system, try adding some vitamin D. I mean, the research on vitamin D has been brilliant, especially last year in December when they found that meta-analysis where they took hundreds of articles and they put them all together. And they found that if we get your blood level to a 50 or higher on vitamin D, that's the zero chance of you coming down with that most common variant that's been traveling around the world. I mean, so how do you know? Like, how do you make sure that your mom's protected? And right, you just put them on vitamin D, right? The idea of like controlling your blood pressure, the understanding about the adrenal glands, and supplementation for that. So, I mean, each one of these things has such a simple solution that's so easy. So then we go on to number 7, and number 7 is about hydration. And I think of it this way, just like as if you spilled poison on the driveway, you'd squirt it down with a hose, right? When we have this poison overload going on in your brain, you got to get that stuff out. You got to hydrate. And so our rule of thumb is always half of your weight in ounces, right? Now, you guys use the metric system, so that's a little different. And I'm using it based in pounds. So you might have to get your little Google Translate to translate it out, sorry. But hydration is super important. And I am a proponent of the alkaline water. I think that's brilliant. I like, I just want to really be sensitive to water that has been the reverse osmosis process. In America, we have a couple of brands. One's called Soni and one's called Aquafina, very popular brands. But those are brands that have been used this reverse osmosis. And the guy that wrote like the big article and research on water said if you were stranded in the desert and you had a whole truck full of that water, you still die of dehydration. And it's simply because there's no living principles inside that water. So, what you guys have available there, I'm not sure, but I mean, I would think like a mountain spring water would be great. That's exactly what I use. That's exactly.
I saw your machine there, and I recommend it on the channel.
Right.
I've got lovely lady,
Yeah.
Adeline. And
Yeah.
that was one of the first things I changed was the water.
Oh, good. Yeah.
And that started the kind of change. Then I came across the roots, and then,
Yeah.
that took me away from this hot fog, but water for sure. But I
Yeah.
realized that sometimes we all are guilty of this. It's like, as soon as you said hydration, it gets you to think, and it's like, God, I was just thinking I need water.
Right.
We have to really tune in, because sometimes I can go for long periods and then we can do it to ourselves, like not drink water, but we do need to be
Right.
drinking glass at least every hour.
And so there's another really interesting caveat to that, is that most people, when they feel hungry, they're not actually hungry, they're actually thirsty. And so you find that if you had that water intake of half of your weight in ounces, you'll come to find that you don't eat as much. And so you've got a much better control on the things you're eating. Which that's great, because that's a great transition to number 8. Number 8 is about fat consumption. So your brain is made predominantly of fat. And so there's 2 different kinds of fats that we're concerned with. The first fat is like fish and avocado and coconut oil and olive oil. And those oils are so easy to digest, you can digest them in a day. But peanut oil and palm oil and grapeseed and soy and safflower and sunflower. You eat Doritos, that's safflower oil, corn oil, cottonseed, canola. Those take your body 142 days to break down.
Just eating it once.
Yeah, you stop and you get French fries, or what do you guys call them, chips over there? Yeah,
Yeah.
You get fish and chips. That's taking your body 142 days to break down. So what do you think is going to be a better scenario for your brain that's been injured, that needs to rebuild itself and needs to be neuroprotected, which we do that with oil? Guess what's going to be our better choice? An oil that's going to be easily broken down, easily utilizable. That's where like our omega-3s come in. And the omega-3 is really, really, really brilliant. So fat consumption is a big thing. So again, when we talk about that scenario, that child gets hurt and then, they're off their normal schedule and they're going to stop at fast food and he wants French fries. Guess what? Yeah, no.
Butter.
If it's grass fed from the cow, like the grass fed cow, then I'm fine with that. Yeah. Butter's a great choice. Ghee's a great choice.
Yeah, I have ghee. I did like completely stop dairy. I'm vegetarian. I've been vegetarian my whole life.
Okay.
And I just took out eggs from my diet and stopped eating dairy. And that's because with lactose, I would just break out into the skin issues.
Yeah.
But I think it was just not eating the right fats. And
well, so and that's the thing with that, is that most people that are allergic to dairy, there's 2 parts of dairy. There's one part that's called casein and there's another part called whey.
Yeah.
And casein is the problem.
Casein.
Like 90% of the time, casein is the problem.
That's where I learned about it. So that's because of that, watching What the Health on Netflix put me off the eggs and dairy completely.
So in America, we have the accessibility to range-free organic eggs. So where the chickens are just running across, they're not in a cage, they're just on the field eating what's plentiful.
Cool.
And those are the type of eggs that we do actually use. You have heard that old joke about vegetarians, don't you?
No, tell me.
Do you know how you can tell a vegetarian?
How can you tell a vegetarian?
You don't have to. They're going to tell you.
This is true.
What
about the vegans?
That's a whole nother level of crazy.
Well, the thing is,
I mean, the truth is,
down that route. And the thing is, I thought I feel that when I was on that diet, that's when all of this kind of really got amplified. I'm not blaming it, because I think I just had very poor nutrition and knowledge about what I was eating, just from the way we grew up in the Gujarat household, the foods that we eat, the curries. I mean, we cook everything in coconut oil now anyway, and we have ghee in our diet, and then we have the turmeric, the cardamom, all the spices, which are good for you. we don't slab on the butter, but we just don't have meat in our diet. And we used to eat, but then I just stopped eating eggs, and I thought I was doing the right thing.
Yeah. So actually, one of the things I do recommend people
I was
to
miserable
consider.
not eating what I could. I was just miserable.
Yeah.
Can't eat this, can't eat that, can't eat this, can't eat that.
Yeah. Clean fish, and particularly want fish that are not carnivores. So fish that eat other fish, like a tuna, does become more toxic. But like where a salmon, if a salmon's caught fresh, it swims upstream, so it's got really good quality meat and really good quality oils as compared to like the farmed ones. I would never eat the farmed, but those are things that I would have in the diet. And I do think that if you can get to that organic range-free egg, that is a great source of animal protein. And unfortunately, our bodies have been designed to be carnivorous. We are supposed to eat some types of animal, and as long as that's not oppositional to how you grew up or you believe your faith, and always look for
my
that.
father tried to force me to eat meat, because when they thought there was all sorts going on when I was a lot younger, because it kind of transitioned. Anything was, we wouldn't allow it in the house, and that's kind of went through the kind of traditional ways of my mother. But look, I think I'm very open-minded to what works for you may work for someone, not work for someone else. It's also understanding your body, but generally getting yourself into a good state of health. I don't think not eating a lot of foods is definitely not going to help you. You've got to be, having the right nutrition. But yes, we're 8.
Okay, that was 8. So number 9.
Sorry.
So when this coming up is number 9. So we're going to kind of tail on that idea of fat consumption. We're going to talk about the injured neuron. So in this concussion protocol, we will injure the neurons. And so the neurons have a wall that's around them, like a cell wall, and that's what protects us. And we need to be neuroprotective. We need to protect that neuron. And so the way we talk about this, we call it the doorman principle, right? And it's an easy understanding. You've been to a nightclub before, right? So what's easier, to keep the drunk person out of the nightclub by never letting them inside, or trying to get them out once they are inside?
Never letting them come back inside.
Yeah, don't ever let them come in.
Yeah.
That's the doorman principle. So in our brains, we have this operation where we try to heal these neurons, and we need to be neuroprotective. And when that takes us right back to those oils, because the omega-3 oils that we typically get from fish, those are the oils that will actually create that doorman for us to prevent further injury.
Right.
Okay. So, and then that brings us to number 10. Number 10 is a word called priming. Now, have you heard that word before?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, so for the people that maybe never heard about it, priming means the influence of something else has changed what's going to happen next, right? So we knew that in Italy, they had 4 different components to their flu shot annually, but one of them pathologically primed those older population to where if they contracted COVID, they had a very difficult time in breaking that down and getting rid of it. That was called pathological priming. And this idea, once you have that, we've now primed the brain. We've primed the part of the brain called microglia. But what that means is that anything else can really then have a big impact on this and make this worse and perpetuate this as a long-term process. So it could be age, it could be illness, it could be health status, it could be trauma, it could be just a decreased healing process. But in those scenarios, this just goes on and on and on and on and on. Okay. So we really want to fix the microglia. So how do you fix the microglia? Well, and how do you stop priming? There's a part inside of every cell that's the powerhouse. It's the battery, like on your cell phone. So, question: how powerful is your cell phone if it's charged up?
100%. Yeah.
Right. But if it's dead and you have no way of charging it, what's its value to you now?
Yeah.
Right? None. So when the mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of the cell, are dead, that would be like you going on vacation, leaving your front door open and having all your valuables sitting right in plain sight. Right? That's not what you want when you come to LA. We want to make sure that you lock the house up and your stuff's protected, so that when you get home, it's all there and it's safe, and it's a great environment. We need to regenerate and rejuvenate the mitochondria. That's what gives us protection. That's the power and the powerhouse in the cell. So what things fix mitochondria? Pistachios. Did you know pistachios are the food that rebuilds mitochondria? How cool is that? Right? Now,
no.
Oh, absolutely. Me too. So now what things harm?
Roasted, okay. Roasted and salted slightly.
Absolutely.
Oh, great.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm not sure if that changes their nutritional value or not, but they sure taste really yummy.
No, they do. They taste
I'm just going to go on that. If it makes my tongue happy, it's got to make the rest of me happy too.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. So what harms mitochondria? Well, if you open up a mitochondria, what you're going to see, these little things sticking on the inside, and they look like maybe batteries. And these are what are called ribosomes. What makes a ribosome different than every other cell in our body is that it doesn't use DNA, which is the double strand of genetic information. It uses RNA, which is a single strand of genetic information.
Yeah.
Well, why is that important? Because bacteria use a single strand of genetic information. So what are antibiotics? Well, antibiotics are actually RNA scavengers. So what an antibiotic in your body does is it goes into your body, finds the RNA, pops it out, and whatever's connected to it's going to just collapse and die. And so what do you think can happen to the ribosomes when the antibiotic finds the ribosome? Because it's got the same genetic code as a bacteria. So it's going to destroy it. And if you destroy the batteries, guess what you just did to the mitochondria? You destroyed it. So
I'm so depleted, yeah.
You totally depleted. And again, in the most recent cancer studies, what we've discovered is that, it used to be that when poison got into the body and it got into the cell, it went to the nucleus and it scrambled the DNA. And so now the outside looks like the breast, but the inside looks different. And that by definition is a tumor. But in the most recent studies where they actually were able to extract the nucleus out of a cancer cell and stick it inside of a healthy cell, thinking that's what the problem was, it did not cause that cell to be cancerous. And then they reversed it and it didn't recover it. And they're like, oh gosh, we got the right mechanism, but we got the wrong part. And when they did that same research with the mitochondria, and they took the mitochondria out of a cancerous cell and stuck it inside the healthy cell, caused that cell to be cancerous. And when they took a healthy cell out of mitochondria out of a healthy cell and stuck it into a cancerous cell, it caused it to be cancerous.
Oh, good God.
Oh, good God. So destroying mitochondria is critical to understand and to avoid. And so what's the number one thing that's going to destroy mitochondria? Antibiotics. And you can extrapolate that in this scenario, but you can extrapolate this into lifelong health and well-being because of all those people that you're like, how did that happen? She's 35 years old with cancer. All I remember is she just always had strep throat like twice a year. What was she prescribed for that? What did that do to the mitochondria? What happened then to the poisons that were already in her body or somehow entered her body or entered her brain? Now you can extrapolate this whole thing.
Yeah. Well, this is the fight sometimes, and overusage of antibiotics is completely depleting so much in your body, not just the gut. Yeah. And I when I first learned about the sort of health awakening back in 2012, which was my first step into this movement, which was through my health, that the antibiotics is just like devil in disguise. I know it serves a purpose, but
right. And in a life-saving condition, we're totally fine with that. I mean, everything we're talking about in a life-threatening condition, all bets are off. We're totally fine under those circumstances, right? But if what you're doing is you're giving your child an antibiotic because they got a cold and you don't know how to deal with that naturally, you know what? There's some education and inspiration we got to create. And hopefully this is that conversation that gets you there.
Yeah.
Is that cool?
Yeah. And
couple more to talk about. So signaling is how easy we conduct that information in the brain, and that signaling is going to break down. And again, mitochondria is the key. So the mitochondria is back to key to the injured neuron and to the priming of the microglia and signaling. And then the last thing to understand is about depression. And this is a very real thing. And we know that people that have had a concussion and then have a subsequent injury, the percentage of times they go through depression is just radical. And I think that the reason why, you know, I want you to kind of move up to your screen when you're listening to this to understand that if you've got a family members that's having this happen, you got to understand we got to help that person. They got to reach out for help, because all too often the end result is suicide. In the American military, we find that there is 22 guys a day that have had this problem that commit suicide. And when they take themselves out, they typically don't take themselves out, they take their family out too. That's a really serious problem.
Yeah.
So, you know, getting everything that we want, you know, getting these people well, giving them some opportunities, giving them some ability to start looking at like, oh, there's hope, you know, there's a resource, you know. Again, you're not the only person in the last month that traveled from London to come here, you know. But you know, part of what we're doing is we're teaching doctors around the world how to do this process that we do that's been so successful, you know. And when we have like these people that have had like millions of views, and you know, major television you know, networks want to do like 5-minute programs just on our protocols, that's huge. You know, that's just huge. And that's also why I like getting on podcasts with, you know, cool people.
So grateful, because I've personally seen how busy you are. And it's such a shame though that we live in this censorship ridden world. And it was interesting that whenever I've had anyone with the doctor in front, it changes the algorithms with YouTube. And it's interesting. Yeah, because you know, maybe because I've had 2 other shows, I could be wrong.
Right.
So, at this time, because it's quite that's why I wanted to have it at 8 and 9 or 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock.
Sorry.
Because it's big time. No, but the thing is, I think this is safe, because we're not mentioning the keywords that they don't like. So it'd be interesting to see what has been said in this conversation, other than, you know, just nothing but useful and informative and educational, because we can be going out there doing everything right with our diet, with exercise, but forgetting that there's key things that could have happened in our past that's still impacting us today, and how to fix that. Just quick question. So with regards to alignment, how often do people come in with conditions similar as mine? Like, how often do people get themselves, and how often can they do it?
So kind of based on the research. So what the research says is that 2 weeks after an injury that you don't attend to, so you jumped into like the pit of balls and hit your head and didn't do anything about it, 2 weeks later, your body starts scarring. The scar tissue is like a permanent change. And that scar process takes 6 weeks to start. So you got hurt, 2 weeks later, it started in 6 weeks, whatever's permanently changed is permanently changed. So we offer our practice members 2 options. First, and the lowest, is to get checked between that 2 and 5 week time frame, or 2 and 6 week time frame. In other words, once every 4 weeks or once a month. But then as we've progressed with people getting their brain and body in line and just accelerating at such a high level, then the thought was like, why would we ever give away the 2 weeks? So for the majority of our practice members get checked every week. So it's just like Tuesday, 9 o'clock, time to see Coop. And that's what it is. And that's just, and it just becomes yeah, it's just a routine. And the thing is, if they need to be adjusted, yeah, they get adjusted. If they don't, I get to love on them and get to go home.
Wow.
Right? Yeah.
Well, that's going to, I mean, look at that. Think about it in its entirety and the full capacity. You have a team that are just vibrating at a great frequency because they're aligned. And we talk about figuratively and all the time, say, oh, I just want to feel more aligned with myself. And we want to just feel aligned. But
right.
And
well adjusted.
And well adjusted. But in the cases where, you get people like me that have come in that have never had it treated, or just been brushed off by the medics to say, oh, it's nothing. It was just, it will heal on its own. And I'm saying we're talking about since I was a kid. It's never ever been examined. I mean, one cake short of a biscuit or one for my brother. But it's true. I think, how would a person like myself need to get the alignment done? Quite a lot, like frequently, like at least a week.
Okay, so what I would do if you were here and we knew you were going to be here for a length of time, I would actually put you through a trial period. And so I would check you for a couple of days straight to see exactly how your body responded. And based on how it responds, then I can give you a true recommendation. Because there are some people that I have to see them every day, and there's some people I have to see them maybe every other day. And there's, and as they progress, it's going to be less and less and less, because the body's going to be more capable of maintaining that high level of performance. But just like an athlete, a professional athlete wants to maintain a high level of performance, you and I are occupational athletes. There's no reason we shouldn't also maintain that high level of performance, right? And so just as we understand how an athlete keeps their brain and their body so dialed in to what needs to be done, so do we.
Exactly. I just, a friend asked me, she goes, oh, how often do you have to get that done, Alpa? And I said, good question. I didn't ask that.
Right.
I thought, well, one click and I was clicked into place, but I think it'll take a bit more to kind of.
Yeah, well, because again, your body has a memory to it. So it thinks that crooked is normal for you.
Yes.
Right. Just because it's been like that for so long. So it would be our job to re-educate it, to understand that this balanced position expends so much less energy, is so much more functional. It's so much, it puts us into such a health status and arena that you've never been in, that that would be the option we'd want to go through.
Right. Wow, gosh, a lot of informative information. I've really enjoyed this, and I'm going to keep this on YouTube as well as put it on my Rumble. Take a view on it. See if this upsets them, but I don't
think it will. I don't think there was anything we said that was controversial. Like I said, every single thing that we talked about, I can actually draw up the research for.
Well, this the world that we live in is especially with these social media platforms, they need a bit of aligning. They need to be aligned, Dr. Cooper. Well, with that said, thank you very much. Love to invite you back again very soon.
Oh, I'd love to. Absolutely.
Yeah, and definitely I'll do it a day when it's a solo day where I haven't had like four in a day. But I think it's been so well received by me, and my audience will love it, because whoever's meant to hear it and it to help them, because this is what we're here to do. I hope this information helps you all. Thank you so much for everyone who's here. Richard, Tony, Harry, I want to say thank you to the people in the chat. I appreciate you all, and most importantly, thank you, Dr. Cooper. You just a beautiful soul, and I absolutely love you. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's a pleasure.